I'd like to welcome you to Doctor in Your House, and we have subscribers from all over the world, and I'd like to welcome you. And I promise that I will always have great topics which are practical and that can help you. So today we're going to talk about vaccine issues in the pandemic. Can the vaccine prevent long COVID? What are the major side effects after a couple years of the vaccine? And we're going to talk about that. We're also going to get into a very different topic called Negative Thoughts Part 1. Um, I'll get into this in more detail, but I think it's one of the most important topics that can be discussed, either politically or scientifically. I'm going to give you another tip on weight loss and my musical Get Up Again. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about it, and we'll go through some of those aspects and what I'm planning to do. So, thank you for joining me. I really want to hear what your questions are. So, at the end, just click on, the dialogue and let's start one. I'm sure there's always questions that I can answer with the disclaimer that I'm a retired doctor. Yes, I keep up to date, but you always have to talk to your own doc before you execute any of these strategies, or it can be your NP or your PA. Well, welcome aboard, and we'll get right into it. Now, I've mentioned about the symptoms of long COVID. After you get this disease, what happens is there are long term symptoms. These may last for months or even years. It could be as simple as fatigue, body aches, but the most common one, actually, which I'm still surprised at, is acute pulmonary embolism or blood clots. Now, the real question is, if you take the vaccine, will it protect against this? And we do think that the vaccine reduces the incidence of long term COVID. So, who the heck wants to have that? So, get vaccinated if you haven't already. Only about 2/3 to 73% or so have been vaccinated in Illinois. So, it's a real, or even in our nation. So, it's a real important thing. It's even less across the world. There's many nations that are below 50%. So we want to prevent long-term COVID, and we think that the vaccine can do that, but we need obviously more data to form pertinent conclusions. Now, what about side effects from the vaccine? I think this is really important to understand the difference between association and causality. If I'm walking along the street and a trash can explodes, I didn't cause it, but I am associated with it. So when Evan Lipkus, MD, walks along the street, trash can blows up, I'm associated, but I'm not the cause of it. And it's the same thing with the vaccine. The vaccine, there's about essentially a 10 out of 10,000 chance or a 1 out of 1,000 chance that you'll get either a stroke or a heart attack from the vaccine. But it's not causal, okay? It's associated. So there may be no causality at all. And please remember this, if you get COVID, the chances of a stroke or a heart attack are far greater, even if this was causal. So I think that that's important to know. The risk of not taking the vaccine is far greater than taking it. And these are just associations. It looks like Moderna is a little safer than Pfizer, but it's really hard to say. With the boosters, a lot of people are mixing and matching them, which is perfectly okay to do. If you're 60 or over, or 65 or over, really keep up with those boosters because they do help and add to the prevention of both hospitalization and death. So I'm going to do a series on negative thoughts because I really think that if you can better understand more about these negative thoughts, you can treat them and, prevent a whole lot of problems in your life. I mean, when you think about it, negative thoughts are the primary reason people get ill, mentally ill. It's a primary reason for domestic terrorism. People get negative thoughts from reading a manifesto. So, really, controlling thoughts is probably your emotional thoughts because we are in the emotional arena 90% of the time. And our lateral frontal cortex is where our reasoning is. This is what separates man from beast. And if we can tame those negative thoughts by using reason to calm down the chaos, think what we could accomplish. We could accomplish not having murders, domestic terrorism, all these other things, racial hatred, all these things that you see across our nation and across the world, maybe even wars. A lot of these I don't think will go away, but they can be mitigated. And so negative thoughts needs to be taught how to manage them to parents. It needs to be taught to children in the schools. To me, this is just as important as mathematics, English, history, our Constitution, etc. This needs to be taught in the schools. I don't think it will because there'll be too much controversy about it, but there are ways that you can tame these negative thoughts and possibly hold off anxiety, depression, PTSD, and other illnesses that just plague our nation and are even worse during the COVID crisis. I had trouble fitting myself into this slide, but I don't want to be one of the boxes that's a problem. As you can see, our life is kind of like a sailboat. We're on the sailboat. We think about our accomplishments, what other people are saying, our career choices. Right now, a lot of people are thinking about finances, health, maybe poor health, but this all reflects back to the voice inside our heads. The career, the accomplishments, other people, finances, health, they all filter into the self-talk that you're giving yourself. In other words, what is that little voice saying inside your head? Pay attention to it. It's important. And we're going to go through why, but these are the major problems that kind of cause negative thoughts. There's also a genetic component, which I haven't indicated here, because I just read about this today, and I'm going to talk about it because it's fascinating subject matter. Okay, so let's go over these thought processes, and we'll just kind of check the boxes here. The first one are our emotions. This is our subconscious. Your emotions determine how happy you are. Your emotions or your subconscious also determines your talents because, when you develop a talent, you spend, maybe 10,000 hours on a skill set like I did with being a physician. So a lot of what I do or what I did in the field of internal medicine was really automatic. Just like my tennis stroke, I wish it was a little bit more automatic, but it is, a lot of my stroke motions are automatic. How I react to the ball at the net, I'm not thinking. It's a reaction. It's a quick reaction. So your subconscious determines your state of happiness and your talents. So if your subconscious and your emotions are unhappy and are giving you negative thoughts, that isn't good. You need to do something about it. I think the first thing to remember is that emotions are immature. I know you don't want to hear that, but we're in the emotional arena 90% of the time, and this is an immature aspect of our brain. If you don't believe me, look at when people get married. A lot of people who get married say, this is my soulmate. This is the love of my life. And I wish that were so, but then 50 to 60% of those people get divorced, and the all the nice stuff that you liked suddenly becomes the idiosyncrasies that you don't like anymore. So emotions are immature, and if you don't temper or tame the emotions with reason, then you essentially are letting that go. The second one, and I didn't indicate it, so I'm just going to write it in, is our logical brain, which is reason. And I'm just going to say this resides in the lateral frontal cortex. What separates us from the animal. Remember, an animal like my dog has all of the emotions that I have. The dog will wag its tail, maybe when it's happy or it's scared. You don't know exactly unless you look at the type of wag that the dog gives you. The dog may also show love, but he also may bite. So, again, dogs have these immature emotions, but that's all they have. They don't have much in the way of reasoning power. Reasoning power starts to happen after the age of 7 in a human being. Then reasoning begins to take hold, and you can try to teach kids more about controlling of their emotions and the different good habits that they need to develop. So, the other part can be more nefarious, or it can be a good thing. I have a big ego. Well, does that make me a bad person? No. My ego or my self-image was necessary for me to become a physician. I strongly wanted to be knowledgeable. I wanted to keep up to date. So my ego is a part of me, and it's my self-image. Now, if I start to think, hey, I walk on water and I become arrogant, that's an ego that's starting to get out of control. And then if you go to Vladimir Putin, the ego is bigger than his country. Okay, he believes he can subjugate people, kill people at will, take over territory without the regards to human life. Well, that's a psychopathic egomaniac. He has really no conscience of guilt or anything with what he's doing. That's a psychopathic part. But the ego part is that he believes he's, like a god and a king. He believes he's Peter the Great. That's ego. Okay? So ego can be malignant, and I have to flush it down the toilet often if I get a little bit above where I want to be and feel like I know everything, because I don't. And there's so much I don't know, and I respect knowledge. So this is really important. The superego I'm not going to talk about very much, but this is the spiritual side of ourselves that connects in a meditative state. And we'll get into that a little bit more next time. But I just want you to understand these three areas of the brain. Emotions, immature. It's our subconscious. It records everything. It's our center for happiness and talents. So we need to take care of it. If the emotions get stressed out, our talents decrease, and our level of happiness will also decrease. The ego can be a good thing for your career or accomplishment, but if it gets out of hand, subjugation, dictatorships, and domestic terrorism can start to take hold. The superego, again, is a spiritual part. Reason, that's our savior. That's our secret sauce. Because if we can use reasoning to control our emotions, and I'm going to show you how to do that, we are in a much, much better place. Now, I hope you like my obnoxious drawing of DNA, which continually twists and turns. But the most fascinating aspect of negative thoughts to me, and I just read an article about this today, is let me just give you an example. Let's say that your mother suffers a tremendous trauma, maybe the Holocaust, maybe what's happening in Ukraine. This can actually have an effect on our genetic material, on our DNA, on our chromosomes. This blew me away. So in other words, let's say mother A develops post-traumatic syndrome from being raped, and she decides to have a kid 5 years later, but never really treats the PTSD. In her genes now is a genetic trait that can be passed on. How do I know this? Because more cortisol receptors develop and less cortisol binds to these receptors, and therefore cortisol is not able to mitigate stress. So the scars that some of your parents, the traumatic scars that they carry, can be passed on. It might be by the egg, the sperm, etc. I used to think this was totally behavioral. You know, if you were the son or the daughter of a Holocaust parents, well, you just learned, stressful behavior. But that's not the case. In fact, if we take a mouse, and I hate, looking at any experiments done on animals, as I'm an animal lover, but if you take a mouse and submit it to an electric shock and then give it some cherries to smell, every time then that the mouse smells the cherries, what's going to happen? They're going to get stressed out of their minds. That is passed on for 2 generations. But here's the key thing, and this is why I'm bringing up trauma, negative thoughts, depression, PTSD, anxiety. I'm bringing it up because if you get it treated, this genetic mutation can be actually mitigated. Okay, it can be repaired. So this is a real important point to know that if you have emotional issues and negative thoughts, specifically traumatic ones, get them treated. It may make a difference in your offspring, not only from a behavior standpoint, but from what we now call an epigenetic standpoint. This is epigenetics, where trauma gets integrated into the genes. Okay, there's no room for me on this slide. I apologize, but you get a break from my face. Anyway, I wanted to make a couple of points on weight loss. You know, the Mediterranean diet is by far, maybe not too far above plant diets, but it's a very, very healthy diet. And here it is. If you follow the pyramid, you're going to stay away from the top of the pyramid and eat more from the bottom of the pyramid. So like whole grains, fiber, fruit, vegetables, these kinds of things are very, very important to get many daily servings. Now, we found that if you follow a Mediterranean diet, you can remarkably reduce cardiovascular disease. What that essentially means is that actually, when you break this down, if you just have a handful of nuts a few times a week, you're going to get the cardiovascular benefit. Or if you have like a tablespoon of olive oil a day, which is a lot, you can do the same thing. But if you follow a Mediterranean lifestyle, you'll lose weight and you'll end up helping with your lifespan by preventing cardiovascular disease, because these foods are high and rich in antioxidants, and they will actually help you protect against inflammation. Inflammation or irritation is kind of the common final pathway towards heart disease and cancer. You know, when I was a kid, my mother used to say, "Oh, don't scratch that mole, it's going to cause cancer." And I used to laugh at her, especially when I became a doctor. I was so wrong because inflammation does contribute to cancer and it contributes to heart disease. And if we can reduce inflammation through a practical diet and a little exercise, we can do a lot for prolonging our lives. So, on the other hand, if you do the opposite of a Mediterranean diet and you start eating a lot of ultra processed foods, according to a Harvard study, like sugary snacks, refined carbohydrates, which has very little fiber in it, white bread, pasta, and processed meats, you're actually going to get more cancers. We've already identified one of them, which is colon polyps, which are forerunners of colon cancer. So you get both more colon polyps and more colon cancer. We also know already that if you lose weight, for example, from bariatric surgery, you remarkably cut the risk of cancer. So basically, obesity is associated with about 13 different cancers. And if you follow a Mediterranean diet, you're going to probably reduce cancers, but you're definitely going to reduce heart disease. So that's my point. Thank you all for joining me for the Doctor in Your House presentation. Next time we're going to discuss negative thoughts in further detail. I'll review a little bit of what I said today, but again, this is my most important subject. So I definitely want to dwell on how to treat these thoughts, because you'll live a happier life if you're able to do that. And I will give you some practical techniques to do that, to control that little voice inside your head. Also, I just want to mention my website, www.drlipkiss.gumroad.com. This features all my books. One of them, called Life 101, is really dedicated towards the control of your emotions, which is so important. I would pick that book up if you haven't already. And the other ones are just special reports. The weight loss one has been well received. And I reviewed the back one, low back pain, with actually a neurosurgeon. And I keep up to date and give you the latest studies as well. Finally, what about my musical? Well, my musical is called Get Up Again. Well, guess what? It's all about the cataclysms that have occurred in my life. Many of these are common to so many people. I've just had perhaps an unfair amount, at least that's my perspective, but I don't have any regrets, because it has made me a stronger person and the person who I am, one who can be a teacher and help other people learn, but it also gives me a curious mind to learn more myself. Anyway, Get Up Again is going to start on a psychiatrist's couch, and every time I tell a story, it'll break away into a musical number, and I'm going to show you another song next week. Finally, dialogues and questions. Feel free to reply on my video, and I will get back to you. Remember the disclaimer. Yes, I'm a physician. I keep up to date, but I'm not your physician. So you need, before you embark on any of these strategies, to talk to your healthcare provider. And finally, we have a lot of people from all over the world now, which is great. Subscribe. Subscribe is not going to obligate you to anything. You're not going to be pestered or anything like that. Subscribers, the more subscribers I get, the better I can make an impact on people around the world. That is my goal, to positively impact others. That's what makes life worthwhile. It is also a big contributor to happiness. And I think it takes a while to learn. I wasn't always that way. I was into, oh my God, I've got to be the best doctor I can possibly be and be more knowledgeable than anybody else. And I've got to be competitive and all these other things. But really, what matters the most is loving others, being loved by others, and making a difference in people's life. That's what I've come to. So subscribe. It was great seeing everybody. I'll see you in another week. So long.